Hello, my friends. Welcome back. I am so excited to bring to you one of my favorite all-time topics that I can seriously talk about every day, forever. It's the power of self-compassion. Somebody once asked me a long time ago, like, if Oprah were to call you and ask you, like, hey, let's have a conversation, or she would want to interview you for Super Soul Sunday, what would you talk about? And I was like, oh, obviously self-compassion. Why? Because holy smokes, it is so foundational. It is so important to creating the type of life that we want to live, not just creating our desires and our wants, but creating our desires and our wants and experiencing fulfillment and experiencing peace and experiencing equanimity and deep relationships. In order to do all of that, self-compassion is necessary. It is so important. I want to start by just celebrating something because part of the practice of self-compassion, which I'm going to talk to you all about at the end, is getting to celebrate the things that we think are not that big of a deal, not that important. They don't really matter. And let me just tell you that that's our sneaky little ego trying to show up to try to make us believe that who we are is not important. And we get to balance that because the funny little ego, who again we never want to vilify, we want to love and get to know, because the more self-compassion we have for our ego, the more self-compassion we have for ourselves, because we are our ego. That is a part of us. And we want our self-compassion to just explode. We want it to grow. That's what we want for ourselves. So, a quick celebration. I created a couple years ago an evidence-based coaching program, and it was a group coaching program for physician leaders. No one has ever done that before. People have coaching programs for leaders, people have coaching programs for physician leaders, but no one had ever created a group coaching program for physician leaders. And I did it a couple years ago, and it was awesome, and it had great results. And the results were statistically significant. So, in the world of medicine and science, when you test a hypothesis and it turns out to be statistically significant, it means that it wasn't just by chance. So, we published a paper and we wrote a research paper on it, and it got published in medical journals. And that's a pretty big deal. And I learned that I don't really love writing academic papers. That's not my jam. I don't love doing that, but I was lucky because I got to work with an amazing academician who supported me along the way. But it was just so awesome to see that we did the work, that our clients, or the people we worked with, the physician leaders, got the results that they wanted, and the results were statistically significant. So just a big celebration that that's out there, and the articles out there floating. You can search me on PubMed, Vanessa Calderon on PubMed, if you want to find the article. Anyway, so that is part of practicing self-compassion. Old versions of me that didn't realize how important self-compassion was would have never have celebrated that. Or I would have maybe told people about it to boost my ego, but not from a place of genuine, like kind compassion, like, wow, Vanessa, good job. Not from that place. So, what I want to do today is I want to talk about what self compassion is. I want to talk about what it actually is, not what we think it is. So I'm going to actually give you the definition. And if you think you don't need another podcast episode on self-compassion, stick with me, my friends, because this is probably for you. Sometimes we talk about the things that seem so basic and obvious because they're so important and they're so foundational to who we want to be, what we want to become. And I'm telling you from like experience, man, I wish I had this when I started medical school. It would have been so much easier for me. Or even in high school, I wish I had these tools. And I didn't. This is all, for me over the last like 10 years that I've developed a lot of this. And it has transformed my life, which is why I'm bringing it to all of you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what it is. Then I'm going to go through a bunch of like scientific articles, a lot of the data that proves, in case you're still not a believer, as to why it's important. And then I'm going to teach you all how to practice it. All right, let's dive in. What is self-compassion? Okay, so self-compassion is essentially based on three different components. Okay. So self-compassion is the practice of treating oneself with kindness, the same kindness that you would offer to your BFF, to your young kid, to your partner. That same kindness, understanding, acceptance, especially when things are difficult or hard, extending that to yourself with the same warmth, with the same care, with the same empathy that you would do to others. That right there is self-compassion, offering that to yourself. And it is the hardest thing in the world because you guys all know we are our worst critics. And we don't have to be, though. We can also be our bestest friends. We don't have to be our worst critics. We can also be our bestest friends, our biggest cheerleaders. We can train our mind to do that for yourself. Can you imagine what would be possible if everywhere you went, your biggest cheerleader was with you, like talking you up and yeah, that's important. You can do it. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. That's okay. Get back up again. If your biggest cheerleader was with you everywhere you went, instead of your biggest critic, what would be possible for you? What would be possible? Okay, so self-compassion consists of three components. Number one, self-kindness, the ability to understand and be forgiving toward yourself rather than being critical or judgmental, which is what we normally do. It involves offering ourselves that same level of encouragement and support when we are struggling. That's kindness, self-kindness. I'm going to just teach you now, but one of the things I really love when I started really diving deep into self-compassion is this practice of being on my side. So I'm not against anyone else, but I am for me, being on your own side. That's how I think of self-kindness, being on your own side. You don't have to be against anybody else, but you can be for you. All right. The second one is common humanity. Oh man, this is so important. I think about this as like the collective. We are part of the collective. We are part of shared humanity. So recognizing that suffering and that imperfections are part of the human experience. Everyone is going to suffer. That's part of the human experience. Being a human is hard. Choosing to live in this like three-dimensional plane on the human plane, it's really hard, which is why we're blessed with resilience, which is why we're blessed with so many things for us to keep going. It's not just hard to be a human. Humans are also some of the most resilient species out there. So recognizing that struggle and that imperfection, that's hard and shared by everyone, that is self-compassion. Because this will allow you to have a sense of connection to yourself, but also to others who are struggling. It gives you empathy. It reduces those feelings of isolation and shame. Isolation is the ego telling us, oh, it's just me. I must be the only one. It must only be hard for me. And what does that cause? It causes the feeling of shame. Like, why is it just me? Why does everybody else have it together? That's not true. Not everybody has, not very few people are walking around this planet right now having it all together. And then the third component is mindfulness. Mindfulness is the practice of being present and aware of our thoughts, of our emotions, of our experiences without judgment. I like to think about it as compassionate awareness, where I'm not just aware of what I'm thinking, I'm aware of it with kindness. It allows me to like look at the thought that my ego or the inner critic wants to offer me and be curious about it rather than get caught up in it and start to believe it and then be self-critical and then ruminate, which is what happens when we are not practicing self-compassion. So again, being kind to ourselves when things are hard, saying nice, kind things to ourselves, practicing common humanity, knowing that it's not just me that is suffering right now, or it's not just me that is imperfect. That's a human experience. And mindfulness, being able to witness our thoughts, our emotions with compassionate awareness. Okay, so I want to talk about the difference between self-compassion and self-esteem. And the reason why is, holy smokes, man, I used to think I was so compassionate. Why? Because I had a lot of esteem. I thought I thought I was okay. Like I didn't think anything was wrong with me. I thought I was okay. I worked hard. I succeeded. I was going to medical school, blah, 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 on and on. I thought things were fine. But the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion is that self-esteem is conditional. It's conditional. You have esteem only when things are going well. And when things are not going well, if you don't have self-compassion, The fall stinks. It feels horrible. That is why it was so hard for me to feel things like failure or disappointment. And I know a lot of you listening can resonate with me because when we are driven to be these high achievers, high functioning folks, a lot of us are driven by external validation. And external validation can feel good. That's esteem. It can feel really good, like, oh, I'm making everybody so proud. But the second that you don't have that, then you feel really bad. That's where disappointment comes in, failure, the fear of being imperfect. All of those things show up for you. And that is why we need self compassion. Okay, so let's dive into the benefits of self compassion. Listen, I'm going to list off a bunch of benefits right now. It is so beneficial. And even though it is so beneficial, people still don't practice it and they don't adopt it. We'll talk about that in a second, too. But what about it is beneficial? So let's talk about this because there are so many benefits, psychological benefits, career benefits, so many benefits. Number one, the most important, I absolutely believe that the most important benefit of practicing self-compassion is that you feel better. You feel better. And don't you want to feel good? Like, who doesn't want to feel good? Who wants to be stressed and anxious and dysregulated all the time? Nobody. We want to feel good. We want to feel calm. We want to feel at peace. We want to experience equanimity. Most of us do. I work with so many of my clients, and when we get all the way down to the bottom, it's like, I just want fulfillment. I want peace. Yes, peace. Self-compassion allows you to feel better. It allows you to experience peace instead of judgment. It reduces stress and anxiety by reducing one of the most famous, one of the most common stress hormones, cortisol. And it helps you not feel as anxious. It also improves your emotional regulation. So I did a whole episode on the regulated nervous system. I can't remember, I think 11 or 12 if you're interested in that episode. But having you regulate your nervous system, can you imagine if you walked around with a regulated nervous system everywhere you went? Or if you notice, like, oh, yeah, that right there is a dysregulated nervous system. I know what it feels like in my body. And I also know how to practice self compassion to get me back to a regulated state. That is so powerful. You want to be regulated because your outcomes in life are always going to be a function of whatever event life throws your way and how you choose to are. Now, most of us are reacting to whatever event life throws our way, and we're not getting intentional outcomes. We're not getting the outcomes we want. But when you can be regulated and you can pause between the event and how you choose to react, then your reaction becomes a thoughtful response, how I choose to respond to the event. That is powerful. That is the power of self-compassion. You also have just greater psychological well-being. Obviously, right? If you think good thoughts about yourself, you're probably not going to be prone to depression, or you're not going to be prone to like negative self-image issues or anxiety or all those types of things. And you're going to have just more resilience. You're going to be able to bounce. What's resilience? Resilience is the ability to bounce back from difficult situations. When you have self-compassion, you are able to bounce back from difficult situations faster. I talked about in this last episode that I did about failing faster and how I was able to fail faster. Well, I'll tell you right now that one of my tickets to failing faster was self-compassion. I would fail, it would feel horrible. I would be super kind to myself and love myself and get my booty back up again and keep going because I was able to practice self-compassion. And there's so many, it's so funny. Most of the people, when we start working together with my clients, they come and they tell me, oh no, I need to be hard on myself. I need to be hard on myself because that's how I'll make sure I get things done. If I'm too like nice to myself or kind to myself, I'll never do XYZ. I'll never achieve my goals. I'll never go to the gym. I'll never train for a marathon. By the way, that is not true. But I will tell you that that's programming, man. A lot of it is societal programming. We have been taught that that is what we need to do to keep going, especially kids from like my generation or my parents' generation. If you didn't give your parents what they wanted, I mean, my parents, they took a belt. My mom, bless her soul, incredible, loving, incredible woman. But like, man, if we were out of line, she would not stand for it. But those are not the ways we get the results. In fact, there's so much literature in child psychology right now to show that if your kids are not giving you the results they want, you meet it with curiosity and positive reinforcement. Curiosity and positive reinforcement. Why? that actually came from literature of self-compassion. That came from that literature first, and then it was adopted into child psychology. So let's talk about the data. I'm going to talk about the data because y'all know I am a big fat nerd. I love science and data. So there are so many studies that have been published to debunk that whole theory that you need to be really hard on yourself to be successful. That is just not true. Absolutely false. You can be hard on yourself if you want to be successful, but it's not going to make it really fun. Being successful is not going to be really fun if on the way there you're super hard on yourself. So why not try to be nice to yourself on the way to success? Just try it, see what happens. All right, I'm going to go through some of the research articles. Okay, there was a study that was published in the Journal of Applied Psychology that found that individuals who practice self-compassion were more likely to pursue harder goals, like more challenging goals, and it led to greater academic achievement and more career success than the individuals that wouldn't. That study also found that self-compassionate individuals, they were more likely to achieve long-term goals because what they did is they approached themselves with kindness and understanding. And when you approach yourself with kindness and understanding when something is not working out, your brain is tilted towards positive. Instead of your brain being tilted towards negative or neutral, when your brain is tilted towards positive, you are 30% more likely to come up with an innovative or creative solution to your problem. And that has been proven by so much literature out there, including, I don't know if you guys have seen the book on happiness by Sean Aker from Harvard. He talks a lot about how tilting our brain towards positive instead of negative or neutral allows us to be more creative, more innovative, and of course, feel better. Okay, so the next study was conducted from Stanford. So it's a Stanford study that showed that self-compassion was associated with greater motivation, more perseverance, and resilience in the face of setbacks. Those are great things to have. Self-compassionate folks, according to the study, were better able to maintain focus and productivity when things got hard. Okay, how many of you guys want that to be able to stay focused and productive when things aren't going well? I think that's all of us. And there was another study that was published out of the Social Psychology Journal that found that self-compassion was positively correlated with all of the measures of well-being, including feeling satisfied in life, having positive affect, so like feeling good and joyful and feeling that in your body and showing that to the world, and positive psychological health. So what do these findings suggest? That self-compassion essentially enhances your overall function, your productivity, in all of your domains of life. Self-compassion has also been linked to increased creativity. I talked about that earlier, because individuals who are more self-compassionate, they are more likely to be open to experimenting because they're less afraid of failure, because they're less afraid of how they are going to talk to themselves and how they are going to feel when they fail. They know that they can just be curious. Think about Albert Einstein, talk about someone who just was like going out there doing whatever. He wasn't into that negative self-talk. That's why he was able to keep going even when he was failing. And there are so many other examples in history about folks that even though they failed, they're like, oh, that's just another way that it doesn't work. Let me figure it out. So without that self-criticism, we are more likely to take risks. We are more likely to explore new ideas, which again is why self-compassion matters. Okay, so we now know that self-compassion is evidence-based, backed by science, shown to make us more productive, more successful. Plus, we feel better when we practice self-compassion. We're less anxious, we're more creative. So why don't we practice it? Why doesn't everybody just practice self-compassion? Well, plain and simple. There's a few reasons why. Number one, programming. Like honestly, social programming. Self-compassion feels too soft or too feminine, and we've inherited a male-dominated patriarchal society where the people at the top, who tend to be men, have also been programmed into believing that they cannot be in touch with their feelings. And self-compassion, it asks you to feel because compassion is a feeling. Compassion is a feeling. So if I'm telling you, someone who's like been programmed to believe that you're not supposed to feel, that feelings are weak, that feelings are feminine, feelings are going to make you lose your credibility, of course you're going to avoid feeling, including the feeling of compassion. And what's so fascinating about this that I have seen in my experience is that incredible male leaders who are so compassionate with the people that they work with still have a hard time practicing that with themselves. They still have a tough time being self-compassionate, even though they're compassionate with others. Or maybe they're trickling into self-compassion, but they have a really tough time admitting that it's that feeling that is supporting them. It's so fascinating, but it's not surprising. Programming is strong. So self-compassion can be perceived as softness or weakness, and we have vilified that, especially in like high functioning, highly productive professions. We vilified softness. We vilified it as being weak. We vilified femininity. Many of you listening, if you are female, you've likely vilified that within yourself, where we try to go hard, where we try to push more. What else can I do? How can I be more productive? Instead of leaning into what does it mean to balance my divine feminine with my divine masculine? I'll tell you right now, this is my story, which is why I can speak to it so much because this was me. I used to be so heavily masculine oriented. I was incredibly productive, could work so hard, but I was so out of touch with how I felt. I was so out of touch with my body, and I was definitely out of touch with compassion for myself. I did not have that at all. So the second reason people avoid it is because they think they shouldn't need it. Why should they need self-compassion? They should be able to just be successful without it. Why should you need feeling? It's like something might be wrong with you if you need it. And that, sweet friends, is that sneaky little ego. And remember, we never vilify the ego. We don't vilify the ego. We get to learn from it. We get to love it. We get to figure out, what is it there? Why is it trying to protect me? And then from that place, we can redirect it. Because listen, one of my clients was like, well, why do we need to know that about the ego? If I'm already practicing compassionate awareness, why do I need to know that about the ego? The reason why is your ego is going to be with you for the rest of your life. As long as you're in a human body, your ego is going to be with you. It's part of who you are. It's one of the things that we were gifted with to experience resilience, to be a resilient species. And because it's going to be with us forever, the sooner we can get to know it, get to know its sneaky patterns, the sooner we can redirect it to be supportive instead of blocking us from what we want to achieve. More on that later. I think I'll do a whole podcast episode on that because that's a deep topic that I want to dive into for all of you who want support in redirecting your ego, which essentially is going to be with you for the rest of your life. Okay, so one thing that I think is so interesting here when we talk about not needing it, like people don't want to practice self-compassion because they don't want to have to need it. So interesting. Dr. Kristen Neff, who is the top researcher on self-compassion, she is the bomb. I love her. One of the things she said once in a lecture, in a lecture I heard her say, she said, being human is really hard, right? We all agree being human is hard. And for some reason, some people think that they came into this world and they signed a contract that said like, oh, it's not going to be hard for me. Like they signed a contract to sign away their suffering. Like, oh, but I'm unique. I'm not going to suffer. So because I'm unique and because I signed that contract, I don't need self-compassion. And it's so silly to think, but being human, the experience of humanity, of living on earth, there's going to be suffering always, but there's also joy. But there is no joy without suffering, just like the world has those polarities, those dualities. There is no grief without love. You're not going to grieve something you didn't fully love. That's just a fact. And so assuming that we don't need it is just so fascinating. It's just a role the ego plays, and that's okay. We don't need to vilify it. We just need to see it and be aware of it. Okay, so I want to end today's podcast episode by giving you some strategies that I think are really supportive in starting to cultivate and starting to practice self-compassion and make it part of who you are. So I'm going to give you 3 different things that you can start doing. Choose whichever one really lands with you to start practicing. The first one is so simple. They all are simple, but it's just you choosing to practice regularly and sticking with it. So the first one, all you need to do is the first thing in the morning, when you wake up, before you get out of bed, before you pick up your phone, before you go to the bathroom, as soon as your eyes open, you put your right hand over your heart. Bonus if you want to put your left hand over it. You keep it there for about 10, 15 seconds, and you just say to yourself, "Good morning, Vanessa. Good morning, self." Say your name. "Good morning, Vanessa. I love you." That's it. Putting your right hand over your heart, just either hand over your heart for at least 15 to 20 seconds, it releases oxytocin. And oxytocin is a hormone that is released when mothers give birth to babies and helps with bonding. It's an intimacy hormone. It also, by the way, has cardioprotective properties because it causes vasodilation of your veins. That is a little bit much for those of you that don't need that, but it's both cardioprotective, but it also causes intimacy, so self-intimacy. So putting your right hand over your heart, pausing for 15 to 20 seconds, and that's it. "Good morning, Vanessa. I love you." If it feels weird to say I love you, start with just good morning. And then when that feels okay, when that feels pretty good, add the I love you part. Okay, the second one is just start to notice. So there's this practice in mindfulness called noting. The act of noting is where you notice what it is you are thinking or feeling. And the entire practice is just the noting. Notice when you are thinking a thought that is not compassionate. Notice when you are feeling a feeling that is not compassionate. So just the act of noting, what it does is it moves you out of your amygdala, the fear-based part of your brain that's very reactive. That's where the ego lives. And it puts you into your prefrontal cortex. That is the part of our brain that separates us from all other mammals. It's the part of our brain responsible for innovation, creative thinking, for being present. And that's where we want to be coming from. So all you need to do is the second that you feel a feeling of like restriction, like, ugh, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, I'm whatever, or you thinking a thought like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Should is the key word there, because should is always a judgment statement, or whatever it is, like I feel guilty, I don't really want to do that. Just pause and notice. Those are all thoughts and feelings that are likely not based in compassion. And so when you notice, sometimes just the noticing enough is enough to switch you out of that. Because from there, once you notice, you create awareness, and then you can say, ah, I notice that I'm thinking that that this shouldn't be hard for me. Oof, is that true? And then you want to add, could it be possible that I'm not the only one that this is hard for? Because notice what that does. What that does when you add that last part, could it be possible? It opens up the possibility that you are part of you're living a shared human experience. You are part of the collective, something so much bigger than you. And when you can just tap back into that and know that you're not alone, it turns off the ego, because the ego lives in isolation. So, okay, first practice hand over heart, second practice noting. And then after you've noticed, you can ask yourself, is it possible that I'm not the only one that this is hard for? All right, the last one is a meditation. Ugh, this is one of my favorite ones. When I first dove deep into self-compassion, I was so committed because I had no idea how removed I had been from this. And so I was so committed at being better. I wanted to love myself. I wanted to get to know myself and accept myself. And so I found this really beautiful self-compassion meditation, and I started doing it every day. Every day, as part of my meditation, I would do it. And so it's simple. It's 3 sentences. And I put my right hand over my heart, but you don't have to do that. And I say to myself, may I love myself as I am. May I love myself as I am. And then may I accept myself as I am. May I accept myself as I am. And then the last one is, may I be at ease with who I am. May I be at ease with who I am. Those three tiny little statements right there that take less than 15 seconds to say, do that every day and just notice what happens. Just notice what happens to you. Notice after like 2 weeks of doing that, what happens. After a day, probably not a lot. After a week, you're starting to notice, okay, I am noticing that I'm a little softer with myself. After 3 weeks, wow. And then I was only going to give you those three, but I alluded to a practice at the very beginning of this podcast episode that I just want to name again in case it resonates with any of you. And that's the practice of being on your side, being on your own side. So again, this is something I dove headfirst into because, man, I had never realized that it felt uncomfortable to be on my side. Like, and so the practice is for you to say to yourself, look in the mirror and say to yourself, I am not against others, but I am for me. I am not against others, but I am for me. Ooh, that is really powerful. So just try that out and see what happens. All right, sweet friends, we covered so many things today. We covered why self-compassion matters, a bunch of science in between, all the studies that have been published. And I hope I've made you a believer into why you should start practicing self-compassion and just make it part of your everyday. It's going to help you feel better. So that should be enough. But it's also going to help you be more productive, more successful. It's going to help you achieve more from a place of joy and excitement. And when you can do that, which is creating from a place of like feeling fully like in alignment with who you are, like feeling good. So feeling good plus creating from that place, that is how we create fulfillment. That is how you get to the end of your life and look back and be proud of the life that you lived. All right, sweet friends, I'm going to leave you there. If you enjoyed this episode, please, please, please leave a review. It is really helpful for others to find us. And share this episode. Share this episode with the world, with whoever you think needs to hear this, with whoever you think would benefit from just being tiny little bit more compassionate with themselves. All right, love you all. I will see you next week. Adios.